Back from the brink, Novak Djokovic wins an epic for his 5th Wimbledon. Rafa reigns in Paris for the 12th time.
Title 101.
That was a tremendous battle.
Images of the big three over the past decade. We welcome you back to our special. We welcome Paul Annacone, who has spent the second half of this decade here on these chairs. But you had a pretty good chair for about the first half of this decade, didn't you?
Yeah, it's fun, and it was a fun first way to start the first half of this decade, as you mentioned, with one of the all-time greats. But just looking at that roll-in, I tell you, call me sentimental, but I never get tired of watching these guys. But it was just about a decade ago when I was talking to 29-year-old Roger Federer, just starting our professional relationship, saying, you know, you've done all this, what do you want to do now? And to remember his youthful exuberance about what he wanted to do, how much joy he was still having, I was amazed, but I never thought in a decade he would still be playing at 38 years of age at this level. And all three of the guys have gone through adversity, injury, all the different things you can go through, and they're right there still.
It's amazing that they're all playing at this age, for starters, with Roger especially, but with Rafa even, I certainly was in the camp that didn't think he would have a chance to be this successful or even on tour in his 30s, given how much he extracts from his body on each shot that he hits and his intensity. And yet he's still going strong, adding to his remarkable record. Djokovic seemed like he would have the cleanest bill of health, but even he had the elbow issues that set him back for a while. But it sure looks like, I mean, he's talking like he wants to be Tom Brady, Djokovic. He's talking like 40 is when he still wants to be winning. And that's kind of where Roger is right now, which is remarkable.
So maybe we'll be having the same discussion on the next Decade in Review special. But just to put it in perspective, when the first rankings came out on January 4th, 2010, it was Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, 1, 2, 3. And the last rankings of the decade, it's the same three guys. It's 1, 2, and 3.
I mean, it's just amazing just taking a glimpse at the numbers and seeing not only what they've done, the way they've done it, and the consistency through the decade. Murray went through the huge injury hiccup that really has been a remarkable road back for Andy that kind of took him out of the Big Four conversation. But to think that Novak, Rafa, and Roger would be able to be resilient enough to go through 10 more years taking on all comers and to do it at the level of consistency they have, it's uncharted territory.
Did you see that prize money on Djokovic? $105 million for the decade. Did you ever have a decade like that?
No, I did not. He was clearly the player of the decade, and it's kind of sad in a way that he's the most underappreciated player relative to what he's done too. He's just been he's been dominating in the shadow of Roger and Rafa, who've also done amazing things, but unquestionably he was the best player in this decade. His head-to-head record, very good against those guys as well in this decade. So, and yeah, he can probably spring for some decent Christmas presents for his kids.
Yeah, you know, and yeah, the prize money is one thing, but Jim, that's one of the things that's really hard as you watch as a tennis historian, and you see two legends in front of you like Rafa and Roger, and no matter what Novak does, he's never going to be Rafa and Roger. He's just a very different personality, and I find that a little bit hard because, like you said, when you look at the numbers, he was the best player this last decade. It's very clear he was the best player. Doesn't mean Roger and Rafa aren't all-time greats. Doesn't mean anything other than Novak's been the best player. And by the way, no matter what you do, Novak, you're never going to be treated like Roger and Rafa.
Yeah. He finishes third on the fan popularity list. I think he's gotten used to that by now. One way to look at these three is how they did head-to-head, if you will, against one another. Mind you, this isn't for their careers. This is just inside the decade. Novak wins this category too.
This just underscores how amazing Novak has been. He finally tracked these guys down. He worked hard at the end of the last decade to improve his game, shore up the forehand, shore up the second serve. And he's the complete package. He wins on all surfaces. All these guys are the complete package, don't get me wrong. But in this decade, he got the better end of it against these guys. But I'm not feeling sorry for any of them. I'm just in awe and admiration for not only what they're doing for the game on the court, but also the way they comport themselves. They've been incredible leaders in the boardroom, getting more prize money for men and women. So it's been impressive that they're able to do what they do on the court and manage everything else so beautifully, I think, Paul.
Yeah, the tennis is great, and those numbers are spectacular, but you mentioned the other areas of life, right? Being ambassadors for the game outside of competing, what they do at all the events and all the different places around the globe that they travel to put across a great image, number one. Number two, getting involved internally with the politics to try to make sure they leave this a better place than they started. The one thing I want to say about the tennis, which is really interesting, Novak Djokovic, to me, is really the one guy that I've seen in the last 10, 12 years that has made Roger and Rafa really have to try to think about a lot of different ways to beat him. You know, they generally have played their own style, but Novak, to me, has been the one guy that both of those guys at times have been left scratching their head.
And just one footnote, when you look at the comparisons head-to-head, do bear in mind that Roger, 5 and 6 years older than the other two guys who are arguably playing in their prime. So just factor that in however you like.